My name is Natalie Carter and I'm 33 years old. What happened at my sister's wedding is still being whispered about across the entire business community. Picture this. 300 guests inside a glittering ballroom, a live band, chandeliers, champagne, and then my mother's hand striking my face so hard that my diamond earring flew across the marble floor. Why? Because I refused to hand over the keys to my $3 million penthouse right there in the middle of her reception speech. But here's the part no one saw coming. An hour later, the CEO of one of the largest investment firms in Seattle walked through those ballroom doors, and my mother's scream could be heard 3 floors above. That man wasn't just any CEO. He owned 40% of my father's company, Carter and West Capital, and he had something very specific to say about what he had just witnessed on a live stream. Before I tell you about that party and the slap I got from my mom, please take a second to like and subscribe to this channel, only if you believe in stories of justice finally being served. And let me know where you're watching from and what time, because I actually read every comment. Now then, let me take you back to that morning, the morning I thought I was just attending my sister's perfect wedding. I arrived at the Evermont Grand Hotel at 8 o'clock a.m., 3 hours before the ceremony. The ballroom shimmered like something out of a bridal magazine. White roses, golden ribbons, every corner polished until it gleamed, exactly what Isabella Carter had dreamed of since we were little girls. I had contributed $80,000 to make that dream come true, though of course no one would ever mention that. "Natalie," my mother finally said, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. "That dress, couldn't you have chosen something softer? You look like you're walking into a board meeting, not your sister's wedding." I smoothed the navy silk of my dress. Elegant, professional, maybe too much so. "Good morning to you too, Mom," I said quietly. She didn't even acknowledge the greeting. Instead, she sighed. "Look at Isabella, she's glowing, a real bride." The comparison wasn't new, it never was. For 33 years, I'd been the daughter who was too ambitious, too independent, too masculine in her choices. Isabella was the princess, sweet, traditional, everything our parents had ever wanted in a daughter. "Natalie, could you check the seating chart again?" my father called out from across the ballroom. "But don't rearrange anything this time, please." I bit my tongue. The seating plan was a disaster, divorced couples placed side by side, rival business partners forced to share a table. But pointing that out would only make me difficult again. They didn't know because I'd never told them that I wasn't just some mid-level manager at a random firm. I was vice president of global development at Carter and West Capital, overseeing the entire Asia-Pacific expansion. But in this family, even that somehow counted as another failure. "Of course, Dad," I said evenly, keeping my voice calm. "I'll make sure everything looks perfect for Isabella." "Family comes first, Natalie," he reminded me, appearing beside me as I straightened a crooked centerpiece. "You'll understand that when you finally settle down. You'll understand once you have a family of your own," my father added. "When you finally settle down." It was a subtle jab, but it landed exactly where he wanted. At 33, my single status was treated as a failure far greater than any professional success could ever redeem. "Robert, leave her be," Aunt Marjorie said, with a tone that sounded more entertained than defensive. "Not everyone is as lucky as Isabella, finding true love so young." I focused on the centerpiece again, letting their voices wash over me like background noise. Around us, relatives whispered their judgments behind crystal glasses and polite smiles. Still no ring on Natalie's hand. After all those years in the city, you'd think she'd meet someone by now. Poor Elaine, at least she'll have a grandchild soon, thanks to Isabella. From across the room, my cousin Kevin snorted. "Hey Natalie," he called out loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe if you spent less time in boardrooms and more time in bedrooms, you'd have a family too." Laughter rippled through the relatives like static, warm, easy laughter, the kind that burns cold when it's aimed at you. I wanted to tell them about the 3 men I dated this year, all of whom couldn't handle being with a woman more successful than them. I wanted to say that being single was a choice, not a failure, but what would be the point? My mother was already explaining loudly enough for half the room to hear that I was just too picky for my own good. I adjusted another crooked centerpiece, my hand steady despite the familiar sting of being dismissed. They didn't know who I really was, and maybe that was for the best. "So, Natalie," chirped Aunt Janet during the pre-ceremony mingling, "how's that little apartment of yours in the city?" "Must be cozy. It's a penthouse, actually," I corrected gently. The crowd around us burst into polite laughter. "Oh, a penthouse." Aunt Janet wiped a tear from her eye. Natalie and her big city dreams. "She's always exaggerating." Isabella floated by in her wedding gown, beaming. "Last year, she said she was buying a Tesla. Can you imagine? I had bought a Tesla. It was parked right outside, but I only smiled." "Natalie's always been ambitious," my mother added in that tone that made ambitious sound like a character flaw. "Truly too ambitious." "There's nothing wrong with a modest apartment," Uncle Edward added, his tone dripping with condescension. Not everyone can afford luxury, you know. Nothing to be ashamed of, kid. My phone buzzed, a notification from the front desk of my building confirming tomorrow's delivery to my 450FT penthouse on the 45th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a panoramic view of the Seattle skyline, a home I'd paid for in full after closing the Tokyo deal. I could have shown them photos. I could have pulled up the virtual tour I'd saved. I could have mentioned the Architectural Digest feature from last month, but what would that prove? That I still needed their approval. "You're right, Uncle Edward," I said instead, my voice calm. "Nothing wrong with living within your means." Isabella laughed, that perfect tinkling sound she'd mastered years ago. "See, Mom, Natalie's finally learning to be realistic." The irony was almost poetic. I stood by the ballroom window, staring at the city skyline, the same skyline my penthouse towered above. 10 years, that's how long it took me to climb from entry-level analyst to vice president. 10 years of 80-hour weeks, red-eye flights, and deals that made headlines in the Financial Times. That penthouse wasn't just property, it was proof. Proof that the girl they once dismissed had built something extraordinary. Proof that I didn't need their approval, their money, or their connections. Every square foot was paid for with my own success. If I handed it over to Isabella, if I gave her those keys like it was some party favor, what would that make me? The family's permanent backup plan, their walking ATM existing only to fund the golden child's happiness.